My name is Aboni Martinez, and I'm 34 years old. For most of my life, I believed that being the reasonable one in the family meant swallowing discomfort, letting things slide, laughing off moments that didn't quite feel right, because pushing back would cause drama. I told myself that was maturity, that was love. I didn't realize I was training everyone around me to treat my boundaries like suggestions. The day everything finally cracked open started quietly, too quietly. I had just come home from work, my brain still buzzing with emails and unfinished tasks, when something felt off. I couldn't place it at first. Then I saw my shed. The door was wide open, not nudged, not loose from the wind. Open. My heart sank before my feet even moved. I walked closer and saw the padlock hanging at an unnatural angle, the metal bent and splintered, like someone had taken real pleasure in breaking it. I stood there for a moment, keys still in my hand, listening to the hum of the neighborhood like it might tell me this was all a mistake. It wasn't. Inside, the space felt hollow, empty in a way that made my chest tighten. I drink a lot of soda. It's a bad habit, I know. And over months, I'd built up bags of cans to take to the bottle drop. I'd been planning to cash them in soon, maybe use the money for a small weekend trip or just groceries. Almost every bag was gone. And then I noticed what else was missing. My gardening tools, a steel rake, 2 shovels, a folding camping shovel I actually liked, my gas can, full. A cheap drill I'd picked up years ago, even my electric hedge trimmer and a small chainsaw. The lawnmower was untouched, the weed whacker, the extension cords, the old radio, all still there. Whoever did this hadn't grabbed randomly. They'd picked and chosen. My hands were shaking when I went back inside and pulled up my security camera footage. I installed those cameras quietly a year ago after too many little things went missing from my house. Snacks, DVDs, video games, things I was told I must have misplaced. The footage loaded. Early morning, just after I left for work. 3 figures crept into frame. I recognized their hoodies instantly. My nephews, all 3 of them. They didn't hesitate. One of them pulled out a hammer and smashed my lock like he'd done it before. They laughed, took armfuls of cans, left, came back, and then came back again with shopping carts. Stolen, I guessed, hauling my things away like it was some kind of scavenger hunt. They didn't even bother closing the door when they were done. I sat there staring at the screen long after the footage ended, my chest tight, my thoughts spinning. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't kids being kids. This was theft. And the worst part wasn't the stuff. It was the familiarity, the comfort, the way they moved through my space like they owned it. I called my older sister Rachel immediately. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Ebony, are you sure you didn't just miscount your cans?" she said. "You always forget how many you have." Her husband Bill took the phone next. He sounded irritated, like I was interrupting something important. "The boys are at school," he said. "They couldn't have done this." I drove to their house. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just held out my phone and played the video. The color drained from Rachel's face. Bill went quiet. For a moment, just a moment, they were furious, shouting at the boys, demanding explanations, asking how they could be so stupid. I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe this was it. Maybe accountability was finally going to happen. Then I asked about the money. Rachel sighed. Bill rubbed his face. "They already spent it," Rachel said. "Video games, food." "Almost $200, I replied, plus the broken lock. The air shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the victim anymore. "You know we're barely getting by," Rachel said. 3 kids, a mortgage, holidays just wiped us out. Bill crossed his arms. "You really expect us to pay you back right now?" I stared at them, stunned by how fast the anger at their kids had evaporated, redirected straight at me. This wasn't the first time my nephews had stolen from me. It was just the first time I had proof they couldn't talk their way out of. I told them calmly they owed me the money, or I would go to the police. Rachel exploded. She called me heartless, accused me of trying to ruin their family. Bill told me to get out of their house. I gave them 2 days. That night, my phone started blowing up. Messages, missed calls, accusations. By morning, Rachel told me it was my fault for tempting the boys by keeping cans in the shed. That was the moment something inside me hardened. This wasn't about money. It was about whether I was finally willing to stop being the easy one. And I was done being easy. I slept maybe 3 hours that night. Not because I was afraid of my shed being broken into again, though that thought sat in the back of my skull like a splinter, but because I couldn't stop replaying Rachel's words. "You tempted them. Like I was the one who swung the hammer. Like I'd stood in my own driveway sprinkling cash on the ground and whistling for children to come take it. That sentence was so unfair it almost felt surreal. Like if I said it out loud, it would sound ridiculous enough to break the spell. But in Rachel's mouth, it wasn't ridiculous. It was true. At least true enough for her to cling to. By morning, my phone looked like a war zone. Rachel, you're seriously going to do this? Bill, we're family, Ebony. Rachel again. You know what kind of year we've had. Then a text I didn't recognize at first, because it came from a number saved under a nickname. You got our cans back? LOL. My oldest nephew, Dylan. I stared at that one for a long time. Dylan was the ringleader, always had been. The kid who could turn anything into a game, even cruelty. He'd been the one to show his brothers what rules were optional if you were bold enough. I hadn't answered anyone yet. I told myself I was waiting for them to calm down, for the grown-ups to take the lead. I'd set a clear boundary. 2 days to figure out how to repay me. In my head, that was generous. By lunchtime, the generosity was being treated like a threat. Rachel called again. I answered because some small, stupid part of me still wanted her to say, "You're right, I'm sorry, we'll make it right." Instead, she said, "Mom thinks you're being extreme." That made me go cold. Our mother was the family's gravity. What she believed became the version of reality everyone else settled into. If she thought I was extreme, the rest of the relatives would follow. Mom knows what happened? I asked. Of course she does, Rachel snapped. And she said you should have handled it privately. You want the boys working it off? Fine. But police? Ebony, come on. Working it off. People love that phrase because it makes consequences sound cute. Like theft is a missing homework assignment, and all you need is a little extra credit. You mean you want me supervising them at my house, I said. The same house they broke into before. There was a beat of silence, then Rachel's voice sharpened. That was one time, and you blew it up. You banned them, and you've been holding a grudge ever since. My throat tightened. The one time she meant was the reason I'd gotten cameras in the first place. It started small. Chips and candy, little things that were easy to pretend didn't matter. Then DVDs, then video games. I got so tired of arguing that I started putting my initials on everything with permanent marker, like I was living with strangers. The last straw had been when they used my hidden spare key to let themselves into my house while I was out. They stole 3 six-packs of my favorite blood orange beer, tore through my kitchen, and then Dylan, because it always had to be Dylan, left my bathroom like a message. Unflushed, the floor intentionally soaked. Rachel insisted it could have been anyone, even when the beer was literally hidden in Dylan's room. Boys will be boys, she'd said then. So when she said it now, when she tried to rewrite my boundaries into a grudge, something in me snapped cleanly into place. I'm not changing my mind, I told her. You have 2 days. Rachel laughed, sharp and bitter. Fine, then do what you want, but don't come crying when you destroy this family. She hung up. I sat there staring at the dead screen, pulse pounding, and realized she meant it. She truly believed I was the villain for asking to be repaid for what her kids stole. That afternoon, Dylan sent another message. It wasn't words. It was a photo. A soda can in his hand held up like a trophy, and his other hand, his middle finger raised close to the camera. The message was clear. You can't touch me. I felt heat rush behind my eyes, but it wasn't just anger. It was grief. Because that picture wasn't just Dylan being a brat. It was Rachel and Bill's parenting reflected back at me. The confidence of kids who'd been taught that the world would bend to them if they pushed hard enough. I didn't respond. I drove to the police station. Even walking through those doors felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I could practically hear relatives saying, "Why would you do that to your own sister?" But then I remembered the shed door swinging open, the hammer, the stolen tools, and Dylan's grin behind that mask of entitlement. At the front desk, my voice came out steadier than I expected. I need to file a report for theft and vandalism, I said. I have video. The officer took me seriously the moment I handed over the footage. I showed them the broken padlock. I offered the screenshots of Rachel and Bill's messages blaming me. I even showed Dylan's photo, the soda can and the middle finger, because it wasn't just disrespect. It was harassment. The officer asked about the machete. I told him it was a yard tool, but it still worried me. He nodded slowly, and for the first time in 2 days, I felt like someone was looking at the situation the way it actually was. Not family drama. Not kids being kids. A crime. When I walked out of the station, the air felt different. Heavier. Cleaner. Like the world had shifted under my feet. I knew what came next. The arrests, the blow-ups, the guilt-tripping. And still, as I sat in my car with my hands gripping the steering wheel, I whispered to myself like a promise. You had your chance. Because they did. And they chose to blame me instead. The arrests happened on a Saturday. I didn't find out from the police. I found out because my phone wouldn't stop vibrating across my kitchen counter, like it was trying to crawl away from me. By the time I picked it up, I had 12 missed calls from Rachel, 6 from Bill, and a handful of texts from relatives I rarely heard from unless it was a holiday. The boys had been home when the police arrived. There was a warrant. Rachel and Bill didn't get to argue or stall or spin the story. They had to open the door and let officers walk past family photos and into the lives they'd been pretending were under control. Later, a neighbor, someone who knew Rachel casually, told me what it looked like. Dylan went first. He wasn't smirking then. Apparently, he cried. All 3 of them did. The same kids who strutted through my shed like they owned the place were suddenly shaking, asking for their parents, pleading like the consequences were a prank that had gone too far. I didn't feel satisfaction hearing that. I felt tired. Rachel called me that night, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. Bill took the phone and demanded to know how I could let this happen, like I'd personally driven the squad cars to their driveway. They're kids, Aboni, he kept saying. Kids make mistakes. They committed a crime, I replied quietly. And you told me it was my fault. There was a long pause on the line. Then Bill said, You didn't have to go this far. I hung up. By Monday morning, the family was officially divided. Not the way Rachel had threatened, not everyone against me, but split cleanly between people who'd been stolen from before and people who'd still been hoping it wouldn't be their turn. My aunt called to tell me cans had been going missing from her yard for months. A cousin admitted some tools had disappeared from his garage last fall. No proof. Just suspicions everyone had been too polite to voice. Rachel and Bill didn't talk to me for 2 days after the arrests. Then they were served. The small claims lawsuit was something I'd agonized over before filing. I didn't need the money. I'd already replaced the padlock with a much stronger one. But something about letting this end with just an arrest felt unfinished. Because the kids weren't the only problem. I was suing for $500, the stolen cans, the destroyed lock, the replacement, court fees, and a small amount for harassment. A friend's father, a lawyer, had reviewed everything and said the same thing twice, like he wanted it to sink in. You have a very strong case. The camera footage, the texts, the photo Dylan sent, the video of Rachel and Bill pounding on my door later, screaming for me to come out and fix this. When Rachel called after being served, she didn't yell. She begged. You can't do this, she said, her voice cracking. We can't afford it. This is going to ruin us. I leaned against my kitchen counter, staring at the wall where my nephew's growth chart used to hang back when I still let them in my house. You already let it go too far, I said. This is just the bill coming due. Bill took the phone and tried a different approach. He said I was being vindictive, that I was enjoying this, that I was punishing them because I'd always held myself above them. That one hurt. Because the truth was the opposite. I'd spent years shrinking myself to keep the peace, laughing things off, pretending not to notice. I'm not talking about this anymore, I told him. You can talk to me in court, or you can pay the $500. I hung up before he could answer. 2 nights later, I had friends over. Nothing wild, just a movie, takeout, the kind of quiet company that feels like an anchor after weeks of tension. Halfway through the film, there was a knock at my door. I checked the camera. Rachel and Bill stood on my porch. They looked exhausted, smaller somehow, like the confidence they used to weaponize had finally run out. I opened the door but left the screen shut. What do you want? I asked. Rachel swallowed hard. We're tired of fighting, she said. Everyone's against us, even Mom. That made my chest tighten. Our parents didn't make empty threats. Apparently, they'd told Rachel and Bill that if they didn't start actually parenting their kids, they'd be stepping back completely. Bill slid an envelope through the narrow opening in the door. Inside were 10 crisp $50 bills. From my personal savings, he said, not the joint account. I looked at the money, then back at them. We're not asking you to drop everything, Rachel said quickly. We just want peace. I'm still pushing for community service, I replied. That's it. They both exhaled at the same time, like they'd been holding their breath for days. Fine, Bill said. We'll cooperate. They left without yelling, without accusations, without slamming doors. It felt surreal. My friends stared at me like they'd just witnessed a hostage negotiation. You did the right thing, one of them said. I nodded, but something inside me stayed guarded. Because peace bought with desperation isn't peace. It's a ceasefire. Over the next few weeks, I heard updates through my parents. The boys lost their TV, video games packed away, supervision tightened. Rachel insisted they were dealing with it. I dropped the lawsuit. The nephews still had court dates ahead of them. That part wasn't mine to control anymore. And for a moment, a brief, dangerous moment, I wondered if maybe this was it, if the worst was over. I didn't know then that Dylan was still angry, that consequences hadn't humbled him. They'd just given his rage a new target, and soon he was going to make sure I knew it. The first night after everything went quiet, I slept with the lights on. Not because I thought someone was coming. I told myself I was just tired, that my body was still running on adrenaline. But because silence felt suspicious now. Like the calm before a storm, you don't realize is forming until the sky splits open. Weeks passed. Court dates came and went. Community service hours were assigned. From what I heard, the boys were being put to work cleaning parks under the supervision of a man who didn't tolerate attitude. A retired drill sergeant, apparently. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt watched. Dylan didn't take the punishment the way his brothers did. The younger two complained, sure, sore arms, early mornings, but they adjusted. Dylan fought every instruction, argued, yelled, blamed everyone else. Blamed me, most of all. I heard this secondhand, of course. Rachel and Bill didn't talk to me directly anymore unless it was unavoidable. When they did, it was stiff, clipped, like every sentence had to step carefully around the truth they didn't want to face. The truth was simple. Dylan believed this was my fault, and people like Dylan don't sit with that feeling quietly. It was just after midnight when the noise woke me. At first, I thought it was thunder, a dull, heavy bang that rattled something in the house. I lay there, heart pounding, listening. Then it came again. Bang, bang, metal on metal. I slid out of bed and crept to my bedroom window, every nerve screaming at me to stay hidden. The backyard was washed in pale light from the motion sensors. And there, by my shed, was a figure. He was wearing a mask. Tall, lean, something glinted in his hands. Hammers, plural. I watched, frozen, as he swung at the new lock. The reinforced one I'd bought specifically, so this would never happen again. It didn't break, but the force bent it, cracked the doorframe, sent sharp echoes slicing through the night. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped my phone as I dialed 911. I think someone is trying to break into my shed, I whispered, crouched by the wall. They have a weapon. The operator told me to stay inside, to lock my doors. That's when the figure looked up, straight at my bedroom window. My light was on. For half a second, we stared at each other, me breathless, him frozen mid-swing. Then he did something I still see when I close my eyes. He hurled one of the hammers at my window. Glass exploded inward. I screamed and jumped back as shards scattered across the floor. I felt tiny cuts sting my ankles, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. Before I could move, the remaining hammer slammed against my back door. Again. The knob shattered. The glass pane cracked like a spider web. I backed into the hallway, heart slamming so hard I thought I might pass out. The police are on their way, I screamed, my voice raw. Leave now. The hammering stopped. Footsteps pounded away into the darkness. When the police arrived minutes later, my house looked like a crime scene. Because it was. Broken window, damaged door, bent lock, claw marks gouged into the shed. I showed them the footage. The night vision camera caught everything. The mask, the hoodie, the shoes. Nike sneakers. I didn't even have to say his name. They already knew. Dylan had been fingerprinted after the first arrest. The hammer he'd thrown through my window lay in my yard, heavy with prints that sealed his fate. When officers searched his room later, they found the second hammer. The mask. The hoodie. A Star Wars mask, they told me later. The Grand Inquisitor. That detail made my stomach twist. Something about a kid choosing that face, something designed to intimidate, felt deeply wrong. This time, Rachel and Bill didn't call me screaming. They didn't blame me. They didn't try to protect him. They let the police take him. Rachel told me later, voice hollow, like it had been scraped clean, that Dylan screamed as they led him out. That he flipped between sobbing that he'd done nothing wrong and yelling that I'd ruined his life, that he'd had to get back at me. He was sent for a mental health evaluation. The word bipolar came up. Eventually, it became an official diagnosis. It explained some things. It didn't excuse any of them. Dylan pleaded guilty to avoid a full trial. More community service, mandatory counseling, probation, a month in juvenile hall. Bill came to my house a week later to fix the damage. He replaced the back door, installed a new window, barely said a word the entire time. When he was done, he nodded once, like a man acknowledging a debt he couldn't pay in full. The house felt different after that. Safer, maybe, but also scarred. The younger boys stopped defending their brother after that. They were scared, angry, tired of following someone who kept dragging them into trouble. Dylan didn't apologize. He didn't have to say anything. The silence said enough. And yet, as much as I hated him for what he'd done, part of me couldn't shake the truth that sat heavy in my chest. This didn't start with a hammer. It started with years of being told boys will be boys. And now everyone was paying for it. After the night of hammers, nothing in my family ever went back to normal. Not that normal had ever been healthy to begin with. Dylan spent a month in juvenile hall. During that time, the house went eerily quiet. Not just mine, but Rachel's too. When he came home, it was with a diagnosis, a stack of paperwork, mandatory counseling appointments, and probation that would follow him until he turned 18. Bipolar disorder. The word landed like an explanation everyone grabbed onto at once. Rachel cried when she told me, saying it answered so many questions. Bill nodded grimly, already talking about medication schedules and therapy. And Dylan? Dylan used it like armor. Every bad choice became because of it. Every consequence was suddenly unfair. He acted like the diagnosis itself should wipe the slate clean, as if accountability was optional now that there was a name for his behavior. But even his parents didn't buy that for long. He ended up back in school repeating a year after his grades collapsed. His brothers stopped including him in anything. They didn't sit with him, didn't cover for him, didn't follow his lead anymore. That divide was the first real consequence Dylan felt. Worse than court, worse than community service. The younger two nephews came to see me in July, unannounced, standing awkwardly on my porch like kids waiting outside a principal's office. They apologized, really apologized. They admitted they'd followed Dylan because he made it feel exciting, like they were invincible. They told me they didn't want to be like him anymore. They wanted their aunt back. They wanted things to be normal. I told them the truth. We can start over, I said, but trust isn't automatic anymore. They agreed immediately. No arguing, no attitude. And they meant it. Slowly, cautiously, I let them back into my life. Nothing went missing. They helped with chores without complaining. We watched movies again, played games, laughed. It felt healing. Dylan wasn't part of that. He turned 17 and got nothing. No cake, no party, no gifts. It was part of his punishment. A quiet one, but a heavy one. Meanwhile, the youngest had a birthday a month later and received a new mountain bike. Dylan slashed the tires with a kitchen knife. That landed him in more trouble, and for the first time, I stepped in. Not for him, but for his brother. I bought new tires, fixed the bike myself. When the youngest hugged me, tight and grateful, Dylan watched from the doorway with a look I couldn't read. A week later, Dylan ran away. He left a letter blaming me, blaming his diagnosis, saying he couldn't wait to turn 18 and disappear from all of us, that we'd be better off without him. He came back 3 days later without his bike, without his backpack, bruised and silent. No one knows what happened out there, he won't say. When he came home, the first thing he did was blame me again, and that time, even Rachel shut it down. I'm done letting you use your aunt as a scapegoat, she told him. That was new. By the time the holidays rolled around, the family was exhausted. Arguments about whether Dylan should be allowed at Thanksgiving, at Christmas Eve. Some relatives didn't want him there at all. I surprised everyone, including myself, by saying he should come. Excluding him entirely wouldn't fix him. It would just harden him. So I did something no one expected. I bought him a used metallic green mountain bike, fixed it up, bought him a backpack to replace the one he'd lost. Nothing flashy, nothing indulgent. When I gave them to him, he looked stunned, awkward, almost ashamed. It worked, for a while. At Christmas Eve, he apologized. Out loud. With his parents looming behind him like guards. He admitted it wasn't my fault. That he stole. That he broke my home. That he wouldn't do it again. We shook hands. At New Year's, he stole champagne and drank it alone in the bathroom. Progress isn't a straight line. In February, he got beaten up at school. Badly. Teeth knocked loose. Nose broken. Hospitalized. We later found out why. Dylan had been a bully long before any of this. The kind who picked on smaller kids, slashed bike tires, stole lunches. Someone finally hit back. I helped pay for his medical bills, quietly, without telling him. Now it's summer. The younger boys are doing well, respectful, grounded, welcome in my home again. Dylan is different, quieter, withdrawn. He rides his bike alone, talks little. He brought it to me once for repairs and thanked me without looking me in the eye. When I see him now, there's no rage, just distance. And that's okay. Some bridges don't collapse in one dramatic moment. They erode slowly, grain by grain, until all that's left is space where trust used to be. I still care about him. I always will. But caring doesn't mean enabling. Love doesn't mean silence. And family doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to protect someone from the consequences of their own choices. That lesson cost us years, broken glass, court dates, and scars that won't fully fade. But it saved 2 kids. And sometimes that has to be enough.